The Name They Tried to Erase, a powerful family drama based on true emotions. What would you do if your own family declared you dead just to steal your inheritance? In this deeply moving story, Ellie Whitmore returns from the shadows of legal erasure to reclaim her identity, her grandfather's legacy, and her place in a world that tried to forget her. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about memory, about love that endures, about the quiet strength it takes to stand up when no one believes you exist. If you've ever felt unseen, unvalued, or left behind by the ones who should have protected you, this story is for you. Voiceover, designed for a relaxing, emotional listening experience. Best enjoyed with headphones and a quiet moment. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful family stories every week. What if one day you woke up to find the world had erased you? Your name, your bank account, your very existence, gone. Not by accident, but by the hands of the people you once called family. This is the story of Ellie Whitmore, a woman who was legally declared dead, while still very much alive. But instead of disappearing, she did something extraordinary. She came back, not just to prove she was real, but to reclaim everything they tried to steal, including her name. If you've ever been betrayed by the ones who should have protected you, if you've ever had to rebuild from the ashes of loss, then this story was made for you. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear is not just a family drama. It's a story about memory, survival, and the quiet power of someone who refuses to be forgotten. I didn't flinch when they burned it. Not when the flames curled the paper's edges. Not when the ink turned to smoke. Not even when the scent of charred cotton and lies filled the lawyer's office. I just watched. Watched as my stepmother, Vivian, lit the match with hands that never trembled. Hands that once braided my hair and later pointed me toward the guest house like I didn't belong under her roof. Watched as my father, Richard, the man who raised me but stopped calling me his girl the year I turned 16, dropped the check into the crystal ashtray without so much as a glance. "You don't get to come back after everything," he said, voice clipped, jaw tight. "And this?" He tapped the ashes with the end of the matchstick. "This is what you get for cutting us off." Fiona, my half-sister, smirked like she was watching a rerun she'd already memorized. "Don't look so shocked, Ellie," she said sweetly, crossing her legs. "Granddad probably just felt sorry for you. You've always been good at playing the orphan." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because what they burned wasn't the real check. I sat still, heels pressed into the marble floor, hands folded in my lap like I was the help and not the only person in the room their father had trusted. Mr. Delaney, my grandfather's lawyer, cleared his throat gently. His silver hair gleamed under the warm lights, his voice slow and steady like he'd practiced this moment 100 times. "To Eleanor Whitmore," he said, "Mr. James Whitmore leaves the remainder of his estate. Assets totaling $28,320,000. The room froze. The only sound was the distant hum of the old ceiling fan and the soft click of Fiona's manicured nails against the table. "What the hell did you just say?" my father barked. Mr. Delaney remained calm. "Mr. Whitmore amended the will 3 months before his passing. It was notarized, witnessed, filed legally. The inheritance is valid and final." Vivian's voice cracked. "That can't be right. Ellie hasn't even visited us in years. She didn't come when Richard had surgery, didn't call for birthdays. She abandoned this family." "She made her choice," Fiona added coldly. I looked up, eyes meeting Mr. Delaney's. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, wax-sealed envelope. He slid it across the table toward me. The seal bore the imprint of a pine tree, my grandfather's symbol. He carved it into everything he built, even the beams of the lake house. My hands didn't shake when I picked it up. Inside, a folded check. Blank. A decoy. and a short note written in his uneven, familiar hand. For the one who kept her voice even when the silence was loudest. You were never unseen. Let them do what they always do. Just know, this time you're not alone. Before I could refold it, Richard snatched it from my lap. "What is this?" he snapped, eyes scanning the page. "Is this real?" Vivian leaned over to look. Don't humor her. And then, like a scene rehearsed in some secret room I was never invited into, they tore it in half. Then in half again, and again, until the ink bled into itself, unreadable. Richard reached into his coat pocket. A lighter. Gold. The same one he used to light cigars the night he closed a business deal and told me I was lucky to be included. He sparked the flame without hesitation and touched it to the shredded check. The fire took quickly. It curled the paper like an old leaf in autumn. Ash floated upward in a spiral that looked almost holy. They watched me, waiting for my outburst, for me to cry, to scream. But I just sat there, watching it burn. Because the real check, the real inheritance, was already gone, safely transferred, protected, untouchable. My grandfather had known. He had warned me. They'll try to destroy whatever they can't control, he told me one night on the porch of the lake house, long after the others had gone to bed. So we'll give them something to destroy. I hadn't understood it fully then, but sitting in that law office, surrounded by familiar strangers, and the smell of smoke, I understood it now. They didn't want the money. They wanted to win. They wanted to see me flinch. They wanted me small, uncertain, ashamed, but I didn't give them that. Instead, I stood, quietly, tucked the now empty envelope back into my coat pocket. No dramatic exits, no final words, just the sound of my heels tapping against the floor. Louder than I remembered, louder than any apology they'd never say. Outside, the wind was sharp, but I didn't shiver. I walked to my car, slid into the seat, and placed the envelope gently beside me. Then I reached into my coat and pulled out a smaller envelope, one my grandfather had given me 2 months earlier with a whisper. Don't open it unless they burn it. If they do, it means everything's going exactly as planned. I broke the seal. Inside, coordinates, a passcode, a single line written in that same looping scrawl. It's time, Ellie. Let them think they've won. And so I did. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I used to have a room in that house. Not just any room, a corner one, with lace curtains and chipped blue paint that I picked out myself when I was 10. My name was on the door, scribbled in crayon back then. Ellie's place. Grandpa helped me tape it up. Said a girl needed a place to belong. By the time I turned 16, it wasn't my room anymore. It was Fiona's meditation nook. I remember coming home early from college one winter break. My roommate had a flu, and I just wanted a place to breathe. I had a key, but something felt off the moment I turned the knob. The air was different. Scented candles, pink salt lamp glowing, yoga mats rolled in a corner. My bed, gone. My desk, replaced by a glass table with tiny river stones inside. Even the bookshelf my grandfather built, gone. I stood there for a minute, not quite understanding. Then Fiona's voice drifted down the hallway, carefree and light. Isn't it perfect now? This space just radiates peace. They'd taken my room without even telling me. No one apologized. No one asked. Vivian just said, "You weren't using it." And Dad? He shrugged and muttered something about me needing to grow out of sentimentality. I didn't argue. I packed a small overnight bag in silence and left before dinner. I spent that Christmas in a motel off Highway 9, drinking vending machine cocoa and watching strangers hug each other in a lobby that wasn't mine. It was easier to be forgotten quietly than to beg to be remembered loudly. That was the year I stopped calling, stopped writing, stopped waiting for birthday cards that never came. I sent one letter after that, a polite thank you when Fiona got into Yale and sent me a group text with a photo of her acceptance letter. She wore my old college sweatshirt in it, cropped at the waist, the one I thought I'd lost in storage. She never responded. I remember the night I almost said something. It was the spring after Grandpa's second stroke. He'd asked to see me at the lake house, alone. "I need your help," he said, voice thick, dragging. "But more than that, I need your trust." I nodded before he explained a thing. Because Grandpa, he had never made me feel small, not once. That night, he handed me a small box. Inside, a brass key, plain, heavy, unmarked. "You'll need this someday when it's time to claim yourself." I smiled politely, confused. Thought maybe he was tired, maybe sentimental. But he didn't blink, just looked at me with those storm-gray eyes and said, "They've made you invisible, Ellie, but that's the one thing they should never have done. Because invisible girls, they learn to move without being seen, and when they rise, no one sees it coming." I didn't ask what the key was for. Didn't want to break the silence between us. It was the last real conversation we had. He died 6 months later, and no one told me directly. I found out from a Facebook post Vivian made. A black and white photo of his hands on a steering wheel with the caption, "Rest easy, Dad, we've got it from here." They got the lake house. They got the obituary. They got to be the ones who stood at the podium and cried. And me? I stood at the back of the church, behind a pillar, wearing sunglasses no one noticed. I didn't speak, didn't make a scene. I just watched them fold their sorrow like clean linen, tidy and public. Later, I learned the obituary never mentioned me. Not once. Not even as survived by a granddaughter. It was like I had never existed. That used to haunt me. But not anymore. Because now I understand. Erasure was never the final act. Sometimes it's just the opening scene of a resurrection. And this time, I had the key. The directions were written in my grandfather's hand. Firm strokes, slightly uneven, like he had written them in a hurry. They led me to a back road off Route 7, just past the edge of where the forest thickened into deep pines that always felt like they were listening. The sun had just started to lower, brushing the treetops with gold. It felt too peaceful for what I was about to do. I parked near an old chain-link gate barely visible under the vines. A rusted sign hung sideways from one corner. "Whitmore Lumber Car Private Access." Most people in town thought the company had closed years ago, but I knew better. My grandfather didn't believe in final closures. He believed in safekeeping. The key he gave me slid perfectly into the old brass lock. It clicked with a slow, stubborn twist, like even the door wasn't sure I still belonged. Inside, dust danced in the filtered light. The cabin was small, barely more than a shed, but it was lined with cedar shelves, and in the center sat a weathered oak desk I remembered from my childhood. The smell hit me first. Not decay, not abandonment, but pine resin, paper, and something warm, like home that never left. On the desk was a small wooden box. Next to it, a note in that same looping handwriting. "For the day they burn it." My fingers trembled a little as I opened it. Inside, a folded check, unmistakably real, a flash drive tucked in a velvet pouch, and a bundle of documents tied in red ribbon. My breath caught. The check was heavy in my hand, not just in numbers, though the ink didn't lie, $320,000. It was real, signed, certified, dated exactly 1 week before Grandpa passed. I unfolded the documents. There were 3 wills, one from 8 years ago, where my father, Vivian, and Fiona were all listed as equal beneficiaries. Another from 3 years ago, same structure but with slight modifications, as if they were tightening their hold. Then came the final one, 5 pages, notarized, witnessed, stamped. I, James Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby transfer full financial authority, controlling interests, and liquid assets of the Whitmore estate to my granddaughter, Eleanor Whitmore. This decision is made free of coercion and in full recognition of past family conflict. The last line wasn't legal, it was personal, scribbled beneath the signature. They never saw you, Ellie, but I did. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the quiet pressing in. Outside, the pines shifted in the wind, their needles rustling like whispers. The flash drive felt strangely warm in my palm. I didn't wait. I plugged it into my laptop, barely breathing. A video loaded. And there he was. Grandpa. Sitting in the sunroom of the lake house. That same room where I used to build pillow forts while he read the paper. He looked older, thinner. But his eyes were clear. If you're seeing this, Ellie, it means they did exactly what I feared. They burned the check, didn't they? He smiled sadly, like he already knew the answer. They always confuse silence with surrender. But you were never weak. You just never raised your voice to beg, and that's what scared them most. I leaned in closer, holding my breath. I tried to fix it the easy way. I tried to believe they'd change, but after they took your college fund, after they turned your room into a prop for Fiona's yoga videos, I knew. So I moved everything, quietly, legally, in ways they wouldn't notice, because I knew the moment you returned, they'd try to erase you all over again. He paused, and I could almost hear the lake lapping softly outside the window. Let them underestimate you, Ellie. Let them think you're gone. But remember, truth doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it just walks back in, wearing heels. The video ended. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the blank screen, feeling something shift in my chest. Not rage, not even vindication. Something quieter, heavier. Like the ground beneath me was no longer hollow. I looked back at the pines through the dusty glass window. They stood tall and still, like they had been waiting. The world hadn't changed, but I had. The text came just after sunrise. Ellie, it's Fiona. I know it's early, but can we talk, just us? I stared at the screen, still wrapped in the quilt Grandpa gave me on my 12th birthday, the one with tiny stitched pine trees across the hem. It had been years since Fiona last called me anything but her, as if my name was too bitter to say out loud. I read the message again. Then I typed, Cornerstone Cafe, 11 a.m. No emojis, no heart, no warmth, just a location and a time. The last time Fiona had asked to just talk, I ended up being blamed for ruining Mom's retirement dinner because I didn't laugh at her fiancé's joke about arts degrees being code for unemployment. But I wasn't the same girl anymore, and this wasn't the same game. The Cornerstone Cafe hadn't changed since we were kids. Same old green booths, same slightly burnt espresso smell, same window seat tucked in the corner under the heater that never worked. Fiona chose it anyway. She was already seated when I arrived. No coat, pink sweater too soft for January, hair blown out, lips glossed. She smiled like she meant it. Maybe she did. But I didn't sit down because of her smile. I sat because I wanted to see what kind of show she'd put on today. Ellie, she breathed, half standing like she might hug me, then thinking better of it. God, it's really been too long. I didn't say anything, just eased into the seat opposite her and ordered chamomile tea from the waitress. She stirred her coffee with a silver spoon she must have brought from home. The one in the cafe was plastic. You remember our finals week here? She asked, voice nostalgic. You with your flashcards and highlighters? Me eating banana bread like it was keeping me alive. I gave her a quiet nod. I didn't remind her that she borrowed my last 20 that week and never gave it back, or that she spilled tea on my GRE notes and laughed. You always had a way of planning ahead, she said, her eyes soft. You were like 40 at 20, in a good way. Silence stretched between us like a tablecloth too tight to lie flat. She shifted. Mom's not herself since the will reading, she said, dropping her eyes. She's not sleeping. Dad barely speaks. I sipped my tea. They're hurting, Ellie. They feel like you just disappeared on them. I raised an eyebrow, said nothing. I know it's complicated, she continued, leaning in. "But cutting us off, it was cruel. Even Grandpa said you held on to things too tightly." I looked at her. "Did he say that to you? Or did someone tell you to say that?" Her jaw clenched, just for a second. Then she smiled again, smaller this time. "This doesn't have to be a war, you know. Families fight. They find their way back." I waited, and then it came. "That check, the one you brought to the will reading, was it real?" There it was. The real reason she came. Not for healing, not for forgiveness, for verification. "Because," she added, her voice a little softer now, "if it was, that's a lot of money to just let burn." I set my mug down gently. "It was just a piece of paper." She blinked. "What?" "It's gone now." This silence wasn't peaceful. It bristled. The warmth in her face flickered like a candle in a breeze. "Ellie, whatever Grandpa left you, don't make this harder than it has to be. This family has already lost so much." I stood up slowly, slipping my coat back on. "Then let's not lose more." "Wait," she said quickly. "You know Mom's thinking about contesting the will." I turned toward her, my face unreadable. "She's welcome to try." No anger, no threats, just finality. Fiona's mouth opened, then closed again. I walked out into the cold, the wind slicing through my coat like truth through pretense. But I didn't rush. Each step felt like I was shedding an old skin. I didn't look back, because I already knew what she looked like when she realized the game was slipping. Back at my apartment, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table for a long time, not thinking, just feeling. And that's when I saw it. Taped neatly to the outside of my front door, just below the peephole, was an envelope. No name, no stamp, just paper. Inside, a single sheet. What they burned wasn't the real check. Don't speak. Just move wisely. Look in Box 12 at Langford Securities. You'll understand everything. There was no signature. But someone out there knew. Someone was watching. And I wasn't as alone as they thought I'd be. It didn't come like a crash. It came quiet, like a soft click behind a door you didn't know was ever closed. I was sitting at my kitchen table, lukewarm tea in hand, trying to feel something other than the echo of Fiona's voice from the cafe that morning. That's when I tried to check my bank account. Just instinct. Not for the money, really, for the reassurance, for the proof that my life still lived somewhere, even if it wasn't in their house or their stories. I typed in my login, hit submit, error, account not found. Strange. I tried again, then again. Same message. Maybe the site was down. I opened my credit card app. Your account has been suspended. Please contact your issuer. That's when my chest tightened. Like my body knew something before my brain did. I called the number on the back of my card. A woman answered. Polite, distant, reading from a script. "I'm sorry, Ms. Whitmore, but we're seeing an alert tied to your Social Security number. It appears to be marked inactive." "Inactive?" I asked, barely able to swallow. "Due to a recorded death." I didn't speak. Couldn't. "Would you like me to connect you to our fraud team?" I hung up. I sat there in the quiet of my small apartment, staring at the window where light filtered through sheer curtains, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I pulled out my laptop and opened the State Vital Records portal, typed in my full name, Eleanor Marie Whitmore, date of birth, county of registration, search result, 1 record found. I clicked. There it was. Status, deceased date of death, January 14th. Cause, pedestrian collision, confirmed via dental records. Time didn't stop. The room didn't spin. No dramatic music, just stillness. And a kind of silence that rang inside my bones. Someone had filed a death certificate in my name, and the system believed them, not me. I pressed my palms flat against the table, trying to hold on to something, anything real. The tea had gone cold. I gathered everything I had that tied me to myself. My passport, my Social Security card, a lease, old tax returns, even a birthday card from Grandpa signed, "Love Always, J.W." I took them all to the county records office. The clerk behind the glass had kind eyes. She took one look at my ID, then at her screen, and I saw it, the way her brows dipped. I don't know how to say this politely, but... She turned the monitor so I could see, deceased, certified. "This isn't just a mistake," she added gently. "This is official. Someone pushed this through with supporting documentation. This was approved by the registrar's office. Who can do that?" She hesitated. "Usually, a hospital or an estate executor or family." Family? The word curled in my chest like smoke. "Can it be fixed?" She gave me a tired smile. "It can. You'll need to file a challenge, bring proof, wait for verification, a few weeks minimum. And until then?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Until then, I was nothing. Not dead, not alive, just unacknowledged, a shadow between files. I didn't go home. I couldn't walk back into that apartment and pretend I still had a name. I booked a room at a roadside motel with a busted heater and peeling wallpaper, paid in cash, used a fake last name. The clerk didn't even look up. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the cheap ceiling fan wobbling with every turn. How do you grieve yourself? Not a version of you, not the childhood you lost, not the dreams that didn't make it, but your literal, legal, living self? Gone. Scratched out of systems, buried in paperwork. I opened my wallet. Everything inside was still me, on paper. But paper lies, and they knew it. They hadn't just taken what was mine. They hadn't just burned a check. They'd erased me, carefully, strategically, and with the cold efficiency of people who believed they'd never be held accountable. I remembered something Grandpa said once, years ago when I was still in high school and Fiona had spread a rumor that I cheated on a biology exam. I was crying in the back of his workshop. He wiped my tears with a stained handkerchief and said, "People don't always come for your money, Ellie. Sometimes they come for your name, because once they take that, the rest falls quietly." That night in that dingy motel bed, I finally understood what he meant. They hadn't just come for the inheritance, they came for my story, for my ability to exist in it. But they forgot something. They forgot who taught me to build things that last. They forgot who taught me where to hide truth until it mattered most. They forgot I still had the key, and I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The storage unit sat at the edge of nowhere, past the shuttered diners and gas stations long forgotten, past the rusted highway signs that no longer pointed to anything, just a stretch of cracked asphalt and pines leaning in like they were keeping secrets. Unit 19B, just like Grandpa said. The code word, foundling. It had taken me 3 hours to find the exact location. Grandpa had never written addresses plainly. He believed if something was worth protecting, it was worth obscuring. But the second the keypad beeped green and the lock clicked open, I knew I was in the right place. Dust swirled as the door rolled up with a groan. Inside, silence, shadows, and something I couldn't name pressing against my chest. This wasn't just storage, it was sanctuary. Wooden crates lined one side, filing cabinets the other. But front and center, like a final gesture, was a single black briefcase. Heavy duty, fireproof. Taped to the top, a yellowing note in Grandpa's familiar hand. "If they ever burn you, open this." My fingers shook as I undid the latches. Inside, a tape recorder labeled "For Her Ears Only," a thick manila folder, a red velvet pouch with my initials embroidered in silver. I pressed play on the recorder. His voice filled the unit, softer than I remembered, but clear. "Ellie, I hope you never have to hear this. But if you are, it means they've gone further than I ever wanted to believe they could." He paused. "I wanted to think they would leave you alone, that they'd respect what I put in writing. But men like Richard don't respect paper. They respect power, And people like Vivian, they don't love quietly, they control loudly. I sat down on one of the crates, my throat tight. I started planning years ago, when they erased your bedroom, when they forgot your birthday, when Fiona started mimicking your college essays and claiming them as her own. I saw it, all of it. A silence hung then. So I moved everything. Land titles, transfer records, digital backups, all under trust they can't touch, all in your name, not the name they gave you, the one I knew first, Eleanor Marie Whitmore. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I didn't blink. They'll call you crazy. They'll say you forged it. But you have more than a signature now, Ellie. You have the truth. And that's the one thing they can't burn. The recording ended. I opened the folder next. Inside, my original birth certificate. A notarized copy of Grandpa's final will, property deeds to the lake house, the lumber yard, and 5 parcels of undeveloped land, all in my name. Letters. Dozens of them. Addressed to me, never mailed, most dated around the time Fiona started handling his affairs, each one handwritten, some tear-stained, all full of the kind of love that didn't need posting to be real. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. They kept me in meetings, doctors, signed papers I didn't ask for. You were always the legacy, not the money, you. My hands began to shake, not from fear, from recognition. This wasn't just inheritance. This was identity. This was everything they tried to erase, preserved like a seed in winter. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet, affidavit of intent, signed and notarized, witnessed by an attorney. I, James Whitmore, affirm that all legal and financial power be transferred to my granddaughter, Eleanor M. Whitmore, and that no action taken against her by family or legal agents is to override this decision. Any filing of her death is false and subject to challenge. Dated 10 days before his death. 10 days. He knew. He saw the storm coming. And instead of shielding me, he armed me. I backed up every document, scanned them to 3 separate encrypted drives, labeled them will, identity, land, fraud. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud folder. Then I pulled out the prepaid phone I'd bought at the motel and dialed the number I'd been holding on to. A probate and estate law firm Grandpa had once whispered about over dinner, back when Fiona was first added to the family business. A woman answered, brisk but not unfriendly. Charleston Estate and Trust. This is Miss Orton's office. I need to speak to someone about a contested will, I said. An identity fraud. She paused. Do you have documentation? Yes, I said, and I'd prefer to speak in person. She booked me for 3:30 p.m. As I stepped out of the unit, the sunlight sliced through the clouds like a verdict. Sharp. Undeniable. I locked the door, double-checked the latch, tucked everything close to my chest. They thought they had buried me. But I wasn't underground. I was armored. And this time, when I showed up, I wouldn't be asking permission to exist. The office building stood like a glass monolith against the afternoon sky, cold, gleaming, indifferent. I stood outside for a long moment, watching my reflection in the doors, hair wind-blown, eyes hollow, but something in my shoulders had shifted, not broken, just braced. I stepped inside. The receptionist had a soft voice and eyes that lingered too long on my ID. Please wait in the conference room, Ms. Whitmore. Ms. Orton will be with you shortly. The room smelled like leather chairs and expensive ink. I sat alone, staring at the framed degrees on the wall. Yale, Harvard, Georgetown, all the places Fiona used to name drop like family heirlooms. But none of them mattered now, because truth, when you hold it in your hands, doesn't need credentials. The door opened. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair and sharp green eyes stepped in. No introduction, just clarity. My name is Evelyn Orton. Mr. Whitmore contacted me once 3 years ago. He said he might need someone if things got complicated. I believe we've reached that moment. I nodded, wordless. She sat, opened a leather folio, and pulled out her tablet. Tell me everything. From the beginning. And don't leave anything out. And so I did. The fake death, the erased accounts, the burned check, the family that called me a ghost and then made it real. She listened without interrupting. Not once. Only took notes. Eyes sharp, mouth unreadable. When I handed her the documents from the storage unit, something in her expression shifted. She leaned back slowly and exhaled. They tried to bury you in paperwork, but you came out with fire. She tapped the tablet twice. The will is valid. The affidavit, airtight. The video recordings, invaluable. The documents you found, those will change everything. I wanted to believe her, but belief had grown brittle inside me. They'll fight back, I said. Of course, she replied. They'll accuse you of forgery, emotional instability, coercion. They may even drag you through character assassination. And if they win? She paused, then leaned in, voice lower. They won't. Because you've got something they don't. I waited. Intent, I frowned. They want money, you want truth. The law still knows the difference. She laid out a plan. File for formal reactivation of my legal identity. Submit motion to contest all prior estate decisions posthumously made. Launch independent investigation into the fraudulent death filing. Freeze access to disputed assets pending full inquiry. Prepare for preliminary court hearing within 30 days. She moved like someone used to war, but with the precision of a surgeon. We'll serve them papers by Friday. I nodded, and then, for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. Not relax, but breathe. As I left the building, the clouds were thinning, just slightly, revealing thin bands of blue sky behind them. A woman was waiting at the edge of the parking lot. I recognized her from old photos in Grandpa's study. Gray curls, a cane, eyes like a tired fox. You're James' girl. And you are? Margot, she said. I was his assistant, his executor. Off the record. She reached into her bag and handed me a small envelope. He told me to give this to you once the first papers were filed. Said you'd know when that moment came. Inside was a single photograph. Me, age 6, sitting on Grandpa's lap, holding a toy compass he gave me for Christmas. On the back, in his careful print, "Don't let them tell you which way is north. You already know." That night, I lit a candle and placed it by my window. Not for mourning, but for memory. I wasn't here to reclaim a fortune. I was here to reclaim a name, my name, one they had tried to bury. And tomorrow, they'd learn. You can't erase someone who was never silent, only patient. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in spirit. The walls were beige, the chairs wooden and hard, a place meant to strip emotion from truth, to make grief and greed sit on the same bench and not look at each other. I sat at the petitioner's table, alone but not alone. Beside me, Ms. Orton, calm as ever. In front of me, 3 rows of people I used to call family. Vivian in pearls and practiced sadness. Richard with his usual scowl masked behind concern. And Fiona, hair straight, eyes darting, lips pressed into a line too perfect to be natural. None of them looked at me, as if looking might confirm I was still alive. The judge entered. Gavel. Formality. The air stiffened like starch. This is the preliminary hearing in the matter of the contested estate of James Whitmore, deceased. Names were read, positions stated. Then Miss Orton stood. Your Honor, we contend that the decedent's most recent will, dated 6 months prior to his passing, was executed lawfully and intentionally, naming Eleanor M. Whitmore as the sole beneficiary of his estate. She handed the clerk the file. Furthermore, we submit that my client's legal identity was fraudulently declared deceased in an act of calculated erasure. A quiet gasp from someone behind us. Fiona shifted in her seat. Vivian still didn't look at me. We have the original will, the opposing attorney said, dated 3 years prior, signed and notarized. That version includes all members of the Whitmore family. Miss Orton didn't flinch. We are not disputing the existence of prior wills. We are providing the final one, along with a video recording of the decedent confirming his intent. She clicked a remote. The screen behind the judge lit up. There he was, Grandpa, alive in light and sound. If you're seeing this, it means they did what I feared. His voice echoed through the room, but I made sure my wishes couldn't be rewritten. You could hear a pin drop. Vivian's mouth parted slightly. Fiona went pale. I didn't look at them. I looked at the judge, and the judge didn't blink. When the video ended, the defense struck back. Your Honor, this could be fabricated. Deep fakes are not uncommon, and this young woman has been estranged from the family for years. She has a history of emotional instability. My breath caught. There it was. They weren't going to argue facts. They were going to unwrite me. Again. She dropped out of university, moved states 3 times, lived under aliases. Objection, Ms. Orton snapped. My client lived under aliases because she was declared dead by the very people now questioning her identity. The judge raised a hand. Let's focus on evidence. They presented bank records, photos of me at 20 with dyed hair and tired eyes, texts taken out of context, emails I barely remembered sending. Then they presented the death certificate, signed, notarized, filed. Mistakes happen, the defense said. We were told she died. We were in mourning. I finally spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. No one called me, not once. You posted a memorial on Facebook, and none of you asked if I was breathing. Vivian stood. You disappeared. We assumed you wanted distance. I met her gaze for the first time in years. You didn't give me distance. You gave me silence. And then you built a world where I wasn't allowed back in. She sat down. For the first time, her hands trembled. The judge reviewed the files, then turned to me. Ms. Whitmore, why now? Why contest this? I swallowed hard. Because I didn't want the money, I said quietly. I wanted the memory of a man who raised me to mean something, and they tried to bury that too. A pause. This isn't about winning. It's about being seen. Outside, the sky was darkening. Snow threatened at the edge of the wind. Ms. Orton placed a hand on my shoulder. They weren't ready for you. I wasn't ready either, I said, but you came. I nodded. Yes, I did. The ruling came 3 days later, delivered in a plain envelope, slipped beneath the door of my motel room just before dawn. Temporary injunction granted. Estate frozen, pending investigation. Probate court acknowledges validity of will, Exhibit C, and authorizes continuation of identity reinstatement proceedings for Ms. Eleanor M. Whitmore. One sentence changed everything. No one could touch the money. No one could sell the land. No one could pretend I was dead anymore. I was officially unerased. But the moment I opened that letter, a cold truth settled over me. This wasn't over. This was only the beginning. Miss Orton called me the same afternoon. You did it, she said. We have the ground. Now we dig. She didn't celebrate. She strategized. I want you to stay somewhere else tonight. They'll push back, maybe legally, maybe less so. Less so? The phrase hung like smoke in the air. That night, I moved out of the motel, checked into a bed and breakfast run by an old friend of Grandpa's named Walter. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a key and said, Your granddad once told me you'd grow up to carry storms in your spine. I smiled barely. He showed me to a small room with blue walls and a view of the lake. The water outside looked still, but I knew better. Still water only hides deeper currents. The next morning, the calls started. First, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then, a voicemail. Fiona's voice. Ellie, please. We didn't know it would go this far. I swear I didn't want you to get hurt. She paused. But Mom's not well. She's unraveling. She says you're not who you say you are. The grandpa was senile. She's talking to lawyers I've never heard of." Another pause. "They're coming for you, Ellie, and I don't think they care how." I played the voicemail twice, then deleted it. Regret wrapped in manipulation. That was Fiona's specialty. At noon, Walter brought me an envelope that had been dropped off by a man in a navy coat, didn't give a name. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single photo. Me, leaving the courthouse 3 days earlier, and written in marker across the bottom, "Stay buried." I didn't flinch. I took the photo, folded it cleanly, and burned it in the fireplace. Not because I was scared, but because I refused to give it a place in my story. That evening, Miss Orton arrived in person. "We got discovery," she said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "And Ellie, you need to see this." She laid out documents, emails, internal family memos, and property transfers made after I was declared dead. They sold off 2 parcels of land illegally, one to a shell company based offshore. She pointed to the name of the signatory, Fiona D. Whitmore, power of attorney, retroactively filed. They forged your death to fast-track a land deal. That's not just fraud, Ellie, that's criminal. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "They're not going to stop," I whispered. Miss Orton nodded. "They've invested in your disappearance, and now they're desperate to make it permanent." But it wasn't fear that filled me that night. It was something else. Resolve. For the first time, I wasn't surviving. I was preparing. I stood outside on the back porch of the inn, wind threading through my sleeves, the lake still and silver beneath the moonlight. I remembered Grandpa's words, "Don't let them tell you which way is north." So I closed my eyes, listened to the pines creak, and promised the wind I would finish what he started, not for the land, not for the money, for my name. The final hearing was held on a Monday morning, the kind where the sky can't decide whether to rain or shine. I wore the same dark green coat Grandpa gave me for college, worn at the elbows, soft at the collar, a piece of him wrapped around me like armor. As I stepped into the courthouse, cameras clicked. Someone must have leaked the case. "Heiress erased by her own family," the headlines whispered behind lenses. But I didn't flinch. I wasn't here for their headlines. I was here for my name. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than before. Vivian sat stiff, lips pursed like she was holding in a storm. Richard wouldn't look at me. Fiona? Her eyes were rimmed red. Whether from guilt or fear, I couldn't tell anymore. The judge, a woman this time, steady and direct, called us to order. "Today we hear final statements and review closing evidence in the matter of the estate of James Whitmore." Miss Orton stood first. No theatrics, no raised voice, just truth. She outlined the fraud, the illegal land transfers, the fabricated death certificate, the affidavit, the hidden will, the tapes, the bank documents, the security footage. Each item a nail ceiling shut the coffin of their lies. "My client," she said, gesturing toward me, "didn't ask for a war, but when her identity was stolen, when her existence was buried, she fought to be seen." A pause. "And no matter what inheritance comes of this, she already won." Then came the defense. Vivian's lawyer tried, questioned my mental health, suggested Grandpa had dementia, claimed the will was coerced. But their words fell flat. Because they had no counterweight for a woman who had clawed her way back from legal death with nothing but receipts and a promise. Then the judge turned to me. "Ms. Whitmore, you may speak." I rose. My hands didn't shake this time. "I'm not here for revenge," I began, "not even for justice." A hush. "I'm here because I was loved, quietly, fiercely, and completely, by the man whose name they tried to use like currency." I looked at Vivian, then at Fiona. "You didn't just try to take his money. You tried to take me, but I am still here. With the letters he wrote, the land he left, and the voice you tried to silence. You said I disappeared, but the truth is you never saw me. Not as I was, only as you needed me to be. I paused. But I am Eleanor Marie Whitmore, and that will never belong to you. The judge nodded once. Court will reconvene in 1 week for final ruling. All estate activity remains frozen. Investigation into fraud charges has been escalated to the DA's office. A gavel, a pause, then release. Outside, Fiona caught up with me on the steps. You could have destroyed us, she said, tears brimming. You did that yourselves, I replied. She reached into her coat and pulled something out. A silver locket. Grandpa gave this to me once, but I think it was always meant for you. I took it, not as a truce, not as forgiveness, but as a thread, a scar, a reminder. Inside was a photo of me and Grandpa, and etched on the back, barely legible. She remembers who she is. 1 week later, the verdict came. The will upheld, the fraud confirmed, the estate restored, Ellie Whitmore legal heir, and living, officially, again. But the real inheritance was something else. I returned to the lake house that spring, alone, but not lonely. I repainted the porch, cut back the overgrown hedges, hung Grandpa's coat by the door, just like he used to, and every morning I walked to the dock barefoot, let the water kiss my toes. I'd light a candle, say his name out loud, and whisper mine right after, because it was mine again, whole, undeniable. You don't need the world to believe in you. You just need one voice, one truth, one reason to rise again. And I had all three. My name is Ellie Whitmore, and I remember who I am. And so Ellie Whitmore didn't just win a legal battle. She reclaimed something far more powerful, her voice, her history, her name. In a world that tried to erase her, she stood tall, not with anger, but with quiet courage, not with vengeance, but with truth. This wasn't about land or money. It was about memory, legacy, love that lasts longer than betrayal ever could. If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or made to feel invisible, let this story remind you, you're still here. You matter. And it's never too late to stand up for who you are. Thank you for staying with us through Ellie's journey. If her story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. And remember, no one can take away the truth you carry inside, not if you keep choosing to live it.